Hey there, timekeepers! Welcome back to the channel where we bend reality and explore the wildest what-ifs in the world of anime. I'm your host, Chronos, and today we're diving back into the epic saga of What If Deku Had Quirk Duplication? Part 2. Massive shout out to the incredible Draconite227 for penning this awesome storyline. Your support has been incredible, and I can't thank you enough. It was their second day in class. Mostly normal day so far. But it was after lunch and heroics were about to ensue. Of all the teachers, All Might slid into the room. I am here in a normal way. Several thoughts in unison disagreed with that statement. He was wearing his Silver Age hero costume. Instead of his current hero suit, it was red on the torso, blue pants, a blue cape, and it had white lines traced around his triceps to his chest and then down his legs. It actually made him look smaller than his current costume. Most of the class started to fanboy/girl over the pro hero. Izuku took this time to look around the class. A one Shoto Todoroki was not amused. He had a defiant glare on his eyes. Katsuki looked bored, but slightly more interested than before. Just about everyone else was making comments. As you all might have known, I have been asked to come to UA to teach. I'll be your hero instructor from now on. The man set his hands on the comparatively small podium. He grabbed a remote and clicked it, showing two words on screen: Battle Trial. Today's hero exercise will be Battle Trial. This one is fairly simple. He clicked the remote to show the objective and the 2v2 teams. The objective for the hero teams will be infiltrate the hideout and secure the bomb or the villains. For the villains, their goal will be to defend the bomb until the time limit or capture the heroes. Everyone will be equipped with capture tape. If you can get it around your opponent, they will be considered captured. Teams will be chosen at random. A few students complained about having random teams until Midoriya spoke up. In a real scenario, you might not know who's going to show up to help. It's realistic to assume that you'll have to partner up with someone you know nothing about in order to fight a villain or assist during a rescue operation. Well said, Midoriya. That is completely correct. In live fight, you might have to aid someone you've never met before. It's crucial then to be adaptable and maximize quirk effectiveness, even knowing very little about another person's quirk. Now get into your hero costumes and meet me in Ground Beta. Ground Beta. Izuku's hero outfit was like that of a combat soldier. The snap-on metal guards and protection were a dark green. The rest of the suit was black. There was a thin rubber lining on his arms and his chest. His legs, along with the rest of his outfit that touched his skin, was a smooth cloth material. He recognized it as a typical flame-retardant cloth. Mobility was good, and it was relatively quick to put on. Ida looked more armored than him, being some kind of medieval turbo knight. Midoriya looked like a strike commando or some kind of special operative than a student. The only thing was that he was lacking any kind of headgear, but that was probably for the best. It took away from his rather intimidating look. Bakugo had an explosion-styled hairpiece, grenade gloves that definitely weren't for show, and black and red coloring for the rest of his garb. Denki looked like a street punk and had some kind of metal device on his head. Shoji had a pretty plain-looking skin-tight suit. Ojiro looked like a martial artist. Siro had a skin-tight suit and a power suit helmet. Mineta was a bit weird, wearing what looked like diapers. Tokoyami had a black trench coat and looked pretty cool overall. Kirishima had a mostly exposed chest and red shade all over his uniform. It complemented his hair nicely. Todoroki had a white jumpsuit and fake ice over the left side. The fake ice must be a statement of some kind. Kodo was fairly plain looking, having a red and yellow shirt with yellow shorts. Boyuma looked like a sparkly medieval knight. His belt had been incorporated into his costume and had similar focusing points at the knees and shoulders. Sato actually looked like a classic superhero. His jumpsuit was yellow with white gloves and boots. He kind of resembled All Might. Wow, is that military grade? Katsuki asked as they walked to Ground Beta. Halfway they met up with the girls. Uraraka caught Izuku's attention first, since her suit was skin-tight and had large pink parts attached to her suit at various points. Probably to relieve some of that crazy nausea. It also made him realize she was much more curvy than at first glance. Momo outfit or lack of caught the attention of several guys. Izuku chalked it up to be quirk-related. It didn't leave much to the imagination, but he would not allow himself to think like that. Jiraiya had a punk rocker look and would look like special boots. They had speakers in them? Hagakure was a pair of gloves and boots. It dawned on Izuku that meant she was basically nude, but being fully invisible meant nothing could be seen. It was a little embarrassing to think about, but he pushed those thoughts aside. Ajiri was one of the few costumes that Izuku thought of being legitimately cute looking. It was a neck-to-toe skin-tight suit colored in green at the top and black leggings. She had white/tan gloves and green webbing at her feet. She looked like a frog, which complemented her quirk. Ashido had on an acid-color leotard and a furry collar. It opened in the front to give the slightest of cleavage. Yes, it probably could be. Uraraka-san, look at you, Izuku said to a somewhat flustered-looking Ochako. I guess I should have specified if it was skin-tight or not, Uraraka replied, pouting a bit. No, I think it looks good. Gives off a space, astronaut kind of feel, Izuku stated, smiling back at her. What? Really? That's what I was going for. Uraraka seemed proud of herself now. The large group of students met up with all might in the control room for ground beta. What a bunch of promising heroes. Now draw your teams, the pro heroes instructed, holding out a box. The class of 20 quickly pulled numbers and sorted themselves out. The teams were Izuku and Ojiro, Kirishima and Shoji, Todoroki and Kaminari, Sato and Koda, Uraraka and Ida, Tokoemi and Ajiri, Ashido and Siro, Yayorozu and Hagakure, Aoyama and Bakugo, and Mineta and Jiraiya. Everyone felt between good about the teams. No single team was too overpowered. All Might then displayed on the scene which teams were against whom and which was the villain or hero. This is where the weaker team had a bit of panic. Any team with one of the big four would be tough to fight, but All Might wanted to show them what unadulterated success would look like. Battle number 1, Heroes, Todoroki and Kaminari versus Villains, Kirishima and Shoji. Ijiro knew this was going to be a tough battle. Todoroki, despite what little he has shown, gave off the aura of a total badass. Not quite as manly as Kirishima, but he was in the top 5. All Might had given the villains and heroes 10 minutes to pre-plan. The best Ijiro and Shoji could come up with is, guard the bomb. The heroes were going to be overwhelmingly strong. The bell sounded, indicating the start of the match. The local temperature fell 20 degrees. Ijiro could see his breath. Before he knew it, his feet had been frozen to the ground. With the help of his hardening quirk, he broke free of the ice. Shoji, using raw strength, broke free as well. Todoroki had casually strolled into the room. He was surprised they broke free. Ijiro rushed the white-haired boy. All he saw in his vision was white and unrelenting cold. The bell sounded again, indicating the end of the match. All Might's voice came over the speaker. Todoroki, could you thaw them out? Ijiro was the first to be freed. It had been a landslide victory for the heroes. They were outclassed on a level that made Kirishima in awe of Todoroki power. The two teams got back to the control room. Would anyone like to tell me what the villains did wrong? Momo rose her hand, but Izuku just spoke. They underestimated how much range and power Ice Mage had. They should have opted for a sneak attack right off the bat, as that would have been the best opportunity to attack. All Might mouthed Ice Mage. That is correct. When faced with an overwhelming power, it's best to strike fast and before they're aware of you. Otherwise, defeat or surrender become the only options, All Might stated before continuing. Who do you think was MVP? Momo spoke up first. Clearly, Todoroki-san. He incapacitated both villains and secured the weapon by himself. Ah, great point. For the sake of this exercise, I'll name Todoroki MVP for the first battle. All Might nodded. The next team got ready. Battle number 2, Heroes, Sato and Koda versus Villains, Uraraka and Ida. Sato and Koda opted for a straightforward assault. However, Uraraka and Ida were a bit more clever in their approach. Ida would make hit and run attacks, only dropping back to the bomb when they got close enough. Uraraka would be the last line of defense, as getting hit by her quirk effectively captured her opponent. The bell had rung and Uraraka found herself alone with the bomb. Ida was already out and about, aiming to make hit and run assaults. Their comms were left open just in case. She found some rubble in the room. Using her power, she made them float. She had a limit around 6 tons. Using the rubble, she made a remote-activated trap above the door and along the whole wall in case someone, I don't know, punched a hole through the wall. They were pretty thin, basically constructed in a hurry. Uraraka paced around the room, pondering her power and what exactly it could do now. She'd have to ask Izuku about it later. Ida came up over the comms. I'm incoming. Koda found a bear. What? A bear? Are you sure? Uraraka replied, thinking about how to deal with this new info. Yup, I kicked it. Didn't do much. We're going to regroup and take them on together, Ida stated. Right, I'll be waiting, Ochako replied. She stood ready in a battle stance of some kind. Ida soared through the door. A bit of a correction, he has 2 bears, Ida added, taking up a stance next to her. He noticed her rock field. That's pretty brilliant. That should crush those heroes' skulls, Ida darkly stated. He had gotten a little too into the role of a villain. Ochako was getting a bit worried about him. A fist punched a hole in the wall. It was Sato. His enhanced strength was crazy powerful. A bear barreled through the door just as Rikido did the wall. Ochako lunged forward. Release! 4 tons of rubble came crushing down. The bear was pretty much KO'd on the spot. Sato leapt forward, dodging the rubble. Before he knew it, Uraraka was on him. He went for a wild swing and she sidestepped it. Placing her whole hand on him, her quirk activated. She pushed him up into the ceiling. Since Sato had no way to produce excess force, he just had to float there. The other bear came through Sato's hole. Koda vaulted over the rubble and KO'd bear in the doorway. He was making a run for the bomb. Uraraka had a split-second decision to make. Ida, stop Koda! I'll handle the bear. Ida hesitated for but a moment before speeding off. The speedster easily intercepted Koda. There was tense standoff between the two. Meanwhile, Uraraka had the joy of dealing with a goddamn bear. It was bigger than her and had claws and a powerful jaw. Nothing about fighting a bear felt like a good idea to her. What would Izuku do? She thought, summoning her courage. Back in the observation room, All Might was getting a bit tense. She's seriously considering attacking a bear? Should I end it? Should I believe in her? All Might was in deep thought when Izuku spoke up. Looks crazy, but I feel bad for the bear. It's a melee fighter, so it has to get close to her. It's all up to her to dodge the first attack, Izuku pointed out so matter-of-factly. Back to Uraraka. She was prepared but still panicking. The bear lunged at her. Uraraka tripped backwards, falling over. Out of instinct, she reached out and planted an open palm on the bear's chest. Whatever force it was going to have was no more. She pushed it away from her harmlessly. Well, mostly harmless, the bear was freaking out a bit, being in the air and weightless. Ida had managed to wrestle capture tape around Koda's chest. The bell rung. Villains win! Koda, make sure to calm them down before you leave, All Might requested. The two teams had reconvened at the control room. Can you tell what the heroes did wrong? All Might asked the class. Momo and Izuku spoke up, cutting each other off. They glared at each other briefly. It wasn't a mean glare, but a competitive one. Izuku gestured to her to take this one. I believe Sato-san and Koda-san underestimated Uraraka's quirk. Beyond that, I'd have to say the villain's plan was much better and worked to their strengths. Momo then gestured to Izuku if he wanted to add anything. Izuku did in fact make a comment. I think the heroes also underestimated the villain's resolve to defend the bomb. Bears are pretty intimidating, but clearly they had quirks capable of dealing with that. All Might nodded. Who do you think should be the MVP? Someone else for once spoke up. It was Katsuki of all people. Uraraka should be. While Ida provided support and the initial engagement, Uraraka did all the heavy lifting and did the most to put a wrench in the heroes' plans. I'd have to agree. Uraraka is crowned the MVP of round number 2, All Might declared. Uraraka was just floored by this. Congrats, Uraraka-san, you earned it. Izuku smiled at her. Ida felt the need to say something too. I'm a little disappointed, but they're right. You stopped 2 bears in Sato. Compared to my contributions, you did all the heavy lifting. This is what rang the most to her. Tears started to form in her eyes. Thanks, you guys, she said, sniffling a bit. Alright, let's move on to the next set of teams, All Might declared. Battle number 3, Heroes, Ashido and Zero versus Villains, Tokoemi and Azuri. The villains had a simple plan: guard the bomb in darkness. Azuri had a limited amount of night vision, but could still make out shapes and people. Dark Shadow swelled to near full size. If not for the windows letting in just enough light to faintly see, Dark Shadow would have been full power. Tokoemi didn't have the willpower to control him at that stage. The heroes had a decent plan. Zero would rappel from the roof and burst through a window. Hopefully, they would be too distracted by Ashido to notice him. Ashido, on the other hand, would dare a frontal assault on Dark Shadow. She doubted her acid would affect it much, but doesn't mean she can't make it defend Tokoemi. Ashido would be the problem. Ashido had to fend off both of them, which was not something she thought she could do for any amount of time. This was Mina's moment to shine. Hopefully, she was enough of a showstopper to make this plan work. She wasn't the smartest cookie, but what she lacked in planning she made up in adaptability. Her clothes were acid-resistant to a degree, and her shoes had holes in them. Mina had become quite good at staking across her acid. The bell had sounded a minute or two ago. Shiro and Mina parted ways immediately. It took her almost 4 minutes to find the room with the boom. The door was left open and the darkness was thick in the room. Mina gulped seeing that. She crouched down just out of sight. Tapping her palm, she opened the channel. I'm in position and ready to strike. It's on the 4th floor near the south side of the building. Be warned, it's completely shrouded in dark dash. A giant dark claw ripped through the wall and just missed her. It broke lights as it was being withdrawn. Talk about a close call. Mina took a deep breath to calm herself. Are you okay? Shiro asked, shouting over the comms. Yeah, he nearly got me. As soon as you see me, you need to get in there. I don't think I can hold off both of them. That shadow is crazy strong. Mina explained, taking another deep breath. She put on her game face. It was do or die time, and she had no plans to die. Placing a hand on either wall, she melted handholds in them. She was going to bolt in there once Shiro gave her the go-ahead. I'm in position. Begin! Shiro commanded. She bolted across the ground, trying to stay low. Somehow she managed to dodge a tongue and a claw attack. Tokoemi was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Ashido was somewhere on the walls, being a real nuisance. Dark Shadow was huge, at least All Might's size. Ashido slicked her arms with acid and swung it at Tokoemi. The shadow intercepted the attack, more or less unaffected by the acid. Just as Mina had thought. Ashido was about to make another attack when Shiro burst through a window. He landed right next to the bomb. He was about to touch it when Ashido kicked him in the chest. Shiro flew into the wall. He got up, albeit very obviously hurt. Ashido was left to square off 1v1 with Dark Shadow, while Shiro and Ashido squared off 1v1. Dark Shadow intercepted any attempt to harm Tokoemi, and his counters were brutally fast, and Mina only dodged them by the skin of her teeth. Ashido was more than a match for Shiro. He was holding his own, but if the match continued any further, he'd get captured. Ashido had to think quickly and look for a solution. It was bad enough she was pretty sure they were out of time. Rolling to dodge the last attack by Dark Shadow, Mina found herself next to the outer wall. An idea formed. Using extra strong acid, she flung it at the wall. Her acid quickly ate through the concrete wall. Light poured in from outside. Dark Shadow had been momentarily stunned by the new light. Mina nodded, knowing the plan. Shiro, regroup! I'll take Ashido in the wall if you could fend off Dark Shadow for a bit. She shouted out to him. He wasn't in much of a place to regroup. Ashido launched a strip of acid at Ashido. Ashido backed off momentarily. Shiro used that opportunity to shot tape at Dark Shadow's arm as it went for Ashido again. His tape wrapped around it, and then he pulled. Dark Shadow missed and broke a wall. When Dark Shadow pulled back his arm, taking Shiro with it, he used the force and retracted his tape to pendulum around the room, aiming for Tokoemi. Ashido was about to intercept Shiro when a wide sheet of acid blocked her path. Ashido had been burning holes into the wall, letting in more and more natural light. Dark Shadow's power had waned considerably. It still managed to block Shiro's attack, but just barely. Kicking off Dark Shadow, Shiro aimed at both villains. He let loose 2 streams of tape. Ashido jumped away to dodge, only to get tackled by Ashido. The tape aimed at Tokoemi landed and bombed the man. Dark Shadow withdrew, trying to break out its master. Ashido had pinned Ashido to the ground. Shiro, go for the bomb! Ashido was a lot stronger than she looked. Especially her legs. Ashido was probably just a little too heavy for Ashido to just pick up and move around with. Not that she minded, curves are healthy too. Shiro landed on the ground and ran for the bomb. Just as Dark Shadow intercepted him and started to wrestle him, the bell rung. Villains wins to timeout. Great work, everyone, head back. All Might announced over the loudspeaker. Mina let go immediately and Dark Shadow stopped wrestling with Shiro. You're pretty amazing, Ashido, Mina stated, helping her up. Call me Tsu, please. You were pretty great too, Ashido commented. Ashido-san, some help. My tape is like steel, so you'll need to dissolve it, Shiro requested, kneeling next to Tokoemi. Ashido was worried she could burn her fellow student. Then All Might came on the loudspeaker. It has been recommended to me that you should use the tip of your finger, and it should weaken the bonds enough to get out of. That could work, Mina said, all excited. Her teacher was so insightful. She indeed did as requested. Only put acid at the tip of her finger at around the strength to melt steel and concrete. She quickly ran her finger across the tape. It sizzled a little bit before stopping. It hadn't cut the whole thing cleanly, but enough that dark shadow could rip it off. All Might was very satisfied to see the outcome of that match. It was close. In a real scenario, the heroes would have won, as bombs are dealt with in a different way. That was a close match. I'd say your team's tied. Can anyone tell me what would have tipped the scales earlier? All Might stated, looking around. Mina herself spoke up. If I had come up with the plan quicker, we would have won. I wasted too much time sticking to the original plan before I came up with a new one. Momo then added, I also think Ajiri was underestimated. She was the ace up their sleeve, as it said. Izuku made note of that. It was an unusual way to say a saying or phrase. She must not have a lot of people skills. Which of them could be the MVP this round? All Might asked his students. Izuku chimed in first. Ashido-san. Despite being the cause for losing, she also came up with the plan to turn the tide of battle at its most crucial point. The fact she's aware of this speaks volumes to her character too. The rest of the class seemed to agree to that statement. All Might nodded. Ashido will be declared the MVP for round number 3. Mina leapt into the air out of excitement and joy. Thanks everyone, Mina said, smiling. The next group left to get ready. This was the match everyone wanted to see. 2 of the big 4 would have to duke it out. Battle number 4, Heroes, Aoyama and Bakugo versus Villains, Yaoyorozu and Hagakure. The villains had a simple plan: barricade and last. The heroes weren't much better: attack. This one was a dozy for Momo to plan for. Bakugo had the offensive power of a tank, and literally at that. Her only consolation was that she didn't have to go against Izuku. While Katsuki would be a handful to deal with, Izuku would have been downright impossible to beat. Momo knew her quirk was good, but not good enough to battle someone with 3 offensive quirks, and knew how to use them together or separately. Her plan was simple: barricade the doors and reinforce the walls. She would leave one gap open in them. Traps were laid across the room. Net shooters, tasers, and a single landmine for good measure. She couldn't be overprepared for Katsuki. She couldn't completely count out Aoyama, but that was Hagakure's mission. Before Momo had started to fortify, she sent the Invisi girl out, and with one mission: wait for the 2 to separate, and then capture Aoyama. She should be able to get the drop on him. They even found out that if she held the capture tape in her hand, it couldn't be seen either. After preparing the room, she knelt down in front of the bomb. She then created a longer than normal staff. It was about the length of a pike. Back in the medieval times, they used pikes to defend against cavalry, and sometimes to break shield walls since it had so much reach. There was no sharp end, even though Momo considered it. Instead, it was made from a tungsten steel composition. Closing her eyes, she recalled the conversation between her and Midoriya. Slight flashback. Yaoyorozu and Midoriya had gotten out to the field well ahead of everyone else. She was more than comfortable waiting for the rest, but Midoriya felt the need to break the silence. Well, maybe not need, but he waited to tell Momo something. Maybe apologize for calling me princess. I don't completely hate it, but it reminds me of my mother, and I do dislike her, Momo thought, looking to the other team. Sorry about calling you princess this morning, Yaoyorozu-san, but I'll probably keep doing it. You just have this certain regal nature about you, and I think it's fitting. Izuku sort of apologized. Momo had to be upfront with him about it. I don't particularly like being called princess, reminds me of my mother, and she wasn't the nicest growing up. Momo wondered why she had told him that. Then Momo got a piece of information she was not expecting. You seem like a level-headed person, and I feel like I can trust you. So I'll tell you what my quirk is. Izuku was smirking or grinning, she couldn't tell the difference. She would at some point know what his quirk was, but it must be important to him for her to know. She gestured for him to continue. Quirk duplication. Anyone I touch, I get a duplicate of their quirk, as if I had been born with it. Momo found a lot of pride in controlling her reactions and facial expressions, but this was beyond expectation. She gave him a wide-eyed look, understanding the gravity of his quirk. She made a mental note for the future to prevent him from touching her without permission first. Izuku seemed disappointed with her. He sighed. I thought you were level-headed, but I spoke too soon. I'm sorry that I gave you that burden of knowledge. That was it. He was completely quiet after that. Whether she had known it or not, she could tell they were off to the wrong start. Her mental image of herself cracked a bit after that. Unintentionally, he had rattled her to her core. She had judged someone without getting to know them first and went one step past that. Just hearing his quirk made her not want to trust him, but she knew better. Quirks are just tools after all. Back to the battle. Yayorozu's trance broke when an explosion racked the walls. Having been reinforced with wood and bolts, they could withstand 1 or 2 blasts. She stood up, long staff in hand. She swung it around, getting into an all-too-familiar combat stance. She had to land the first strike, otherwise it would be more difficult to land any more past that. The first strike had to be precise and quick. Momo didn't want to break any bones within Katsuki, but it would slow him down more than anything. A singular blast ripped through the wall. Katsuki rocketed into the room through the smoke screen. Momo wasted no time. He was at near max range from her, but still would land within her strike zone, bringing the staff to her right, allowing her left to slide to the bottom. She made sure to keep the staff to her side and then behind her to the right. She started the swing with her left hand, feeling the burn in her muscles. She took her other hand and slammed it into the staff, causing it to quickly come forward. Katsuki landed with 0 time to react. Her long staff struck him in the chest. His facial expression told her it hurt, but not enough to really stop him. The blow, however, did knock him back a bit and into a net trap. It took seconds for Katsuki to blow apart the net. That was all the time Yayorozu needed. He was well within range of a proper strike, not an improvised one. This time properly, one hand down acting as the fulcrum and the other applying the force near the center of gravity. A powerful strike careened right into Bakugo's side. There was no crack and the hit wasn't a satisfying impact. Bakugo's reaction time must be ludicrous. He had managed to determine which side the strike would happen on and catch it in time. He even used an explosion to reduce the impact force on his hand. It must have still stung though as Bakugo shook off his hand. The two stood there staring each other down. If he tried to let loose an explosion at this range, I'd be too weak and she would counter. A counter that would be better placed this time. Momo was in no position to act. It was a stalemate. Hagakure was slowly, but surely trying to sneak up on Katsuki. When she brought out the capture tape, a feat of planning and skill unlike anything Momo had seen before happened. It all started when she made a split-second glance at the capture tape. Hagakure had the tape up high, aiming to put it around him. Bakugo stepped back into Hagakure and grabbed her arm. He pulled her slightly over his shoulder before using his elbow as lift. He threw Hagakure at Momo. This left him wide open, but also gave Momo a choice to make. A choice he knew that she would make based on her character. Momo dropped the staff and prepared to catch the invisible girl. She didn't have much to go by, but she knew she was coming. Katsuki meanwhile went airborne and circled around to the back side of the bomb. He placed one hand on it. This all happened in a span of several seconds. Just as the bell rang out, Momo caught Hagakure. All that planning and preparation all ruined by Momo. Heroes wins. That was an intense match. Great work, everyone! All Might said over the loudspeaker. Momo slumped her shoulders. She was better than this. They were all back at the control room. Can anyone tell me what went wrong, if anything? As if Momo wasn't feeling down enough already, Izuku was the first to speak. From my point of view, it was a bad quirk matchup. As good and versatile as Yayorozu-san's quirk is, it's not a combat quirk. Same here goes for Hagakure-san. Aoyama-san only got captured because he was talking too much and not listening to the world around him. Very astute of you. That is something that heroes must always keep in mind when facing an opponent. It might be better to wait for backup and contain the villain there as opposed to outright try and take the villain head-on. All Might explained. Momo felt a hand on her shoulder since she had been stuck in her head. Much to her surprise, it was Midoriya, and being him just panicked her briefly. You should teach me sometime. The way you moved and the way you used your weapon, that has to be trained. He whispered to her before walking away. What about my... You know? Momo was worried he had just copied her quirk. Gloved hand? Don't worry so much, Izuku replied. This eased her worries instantly. Also, knowing that someone like him wanted lessons from her brought her spirits back up, if only a bit. Battle number 5, Heroes, Midoriya and Ojiro versus Villains, Jairu and Mineta. Worry was plastered all over Mineta's face. Jairu hated the little pervert, but he was her teammate, so they had make to something work. Alright, you little punk, tell me about your quirk and let's see if we can make some kind of a defense, Kyoka requested. My quirk is called Pop Off. My head generates these balls. They stick to each other, any surface except me, and last up to 24 hours. The stickiness is enough to prevent movement unless you are okay with skin getting ripped, Mineta said, pulling of a grape and sticking it to a wall. We're boned, aren't we? Mineta asked. An idea formed in Kyoka's head. She wasn't the smartest, but she could still come up with good strategies. Put a bunch of those balls around the room like a minefield. Then lace the hallways with them. If they attack head-on, they'll be easy to capture, Gyro explained, grinning. Maybe we can win this, she whispered. The little teen started to litter the bomb room with grape mines. Then out in the hallways, and about 2 floors got covered before his head started to bleed. The spheres were spread out enough for him to bounce around, but not so much that someone larger could get through easily. Even if they managed to avoid all the balls, it would take them too long. Kyoka stood within the safe space around the bomb. She plugged one jack in the floor and waited. The tail man, Ojiro, had never spoken to the green-haired boy directly before. He'd heard his inspiring speeches and his thorough analyzing. The blonde martial artist understood Midoriya was smart and had a powerful quirk. Ojiro-san, can you tell me about your quirk and any other skills you might have? Midoriya asked, standing outside the building. Ojiro chuckled. My quirk is tail. Beyond that, I'm a black belt martial artist. Midoriya whistled. All right, color me impressed. Might have to ask you for a few pointers in the future. What's the plan, Midoriya-san? Ojiro asked. I want you to go for the direct assault. I'll swoop in from above. Just let me know which floor they're on, Midoriya strategized. Why not you go for the direct attack? Isn't your quirk more suited for it? Ojiro questioned, part curiosity, part skepticism. Well, that's simple really. They'll be expecting that, Midoriya bluntly retorted. I suppose that's true. Fine, I'll be the vanguard, Ojiro yielded. Good, I'll see you at the end, Midoriya said just as the bell went off. He touched his face and literally flew away. Ojiro sighed and ran into the building. The first 2 floors, nothing. Then on the 3rd floor, purple spheres everywhere. He recognized them from Mineta. He figured it would be an excellent idea not to touch them. This slowed down his progress considerably. It took him nearly 4 minutes to clear that floor and make it to the next. It was even more dense. Midoriya-san, they're on the 4th floor. If you could do something about these purple balls, that would be great, Ojiro requested. Izuka had just got his partner's message. Was there something he could do about the balls? He focused on one telekinetically. It was just at the absolute range of his telekinesis. It wouldn't budge. It was some kind of super adhesive or molecular bonding. He then opted for the next step, empowered telekinesis. He was up to 42 kilograms of force, and he had gotten much better at shaping the psychic energy. Creating a psychic knife, he cut the concrete from under the sphere. The purple sphere was fairly light. He practiced cutting and moving them around. It took him a minute to get used to the technique. The green-haired teen ran down to the 5th floor from the roof access. He was right above Ojiro. His partner was right, there was a ton of those purple orbs. I'm going to start creating a path. I can only move about 25 at a time, so be patient, Izuka stated on the comms. Empowered telekinesis coming right up. He closed his eyes and reached out with his telekinesis. Then by the dozen he cut and moved them. Ojiro was making steady progress until they came to the bomb room. Mineta was by the door waiting for Ojiro to attack. Kyoka was by the bomb listening? Listening. Oh shit. Changes of plans. They've littered the bomb room with these spheres. I'm going to guess Mineta is immune to his own quirk, but Gyro probably isn't, Izuka smirked. Midoriya opened his comlink. Gyro, you're not the only one that can sense better. Ojiro-san, he's near the door, be prepared when you enter. Under him she stood up and he could tell she was looking up. A jack shot into the concrete, and then another. She funneled her heartbeat into the jacks. It would only be a matter of time before the vibrations would damage the concrete. He started to cut and pick up spheres by the dozen. Gyro must have noticed because her heart rate increased. Then using his newfound weapons he flung them all at Gyro. Her jacks got pulled out, and she was pinned to the floor. Izuka let go of the empowerment, and his world spun. He had hit his telekinetic limit. He shook off the vertigo and walked to another room above nothing. Ojiro had bursted through the door and taken a sphere to the palm. This had proved bad for Mineta as Ojiro socked him with the purple sphere, causing the little teen to violently bounce back. Izuku blew a hole through the floor and dropped down a floor. The bomb was but a few feet from him. Jairu shot out a jack. Izuku caught it with his telekinesis. Thankfully, she couldn't exert that much force with her jacks. Mineta tried to throw a ball or two at Midoriya. Again he grabbed them out of midair with his telekinesis and dropped them to the floor. Midoriya was like the juggernaut, nothing was going to impede his progress. He laid one hand on the bomb and won. Heroes win. Great job, everyone. Head back to the control room. All Might commanded over the comms. Izuku walked over to Jairu. I'm sorry about that. Can you get them off me? She asked bluntly. That depends on two things. Are they touching skin or on your clothes? If they're on clothes, I can remove them. If it's your skin, I don't want to hurt you. Izuku replied, moving away the ones that never made contact with her. I don't care, just get these off me. Jairu retorted. All right. Izuku took a deep breath. He empowered his telekinesis once more. Blood started to drip from his nose. Then all at once he removed every orb. He upped the level of precision for the skin cuts. Instead of making a noticeable wound, they were small cuts. He wobbled a bit. Holy crap, are you okay? Jairu asked, standing up. She caught him as his footing became unstable. I think I overdid it. Izuku slurred, landing on her shoulder. No shit, Sherlock. Let's get you to recovery, girl. Jairu retorted, helping him walk. Midoriya-san, could you before you go? Ojiro asked, holding up his hand. The green-haired teen merely waved at it before it popped off. Ojiro held his hand, there was a small cut on it. Sorry, accuracy is a bit low right now. Midoriya chuckled. Ojiro took Midoriya's other arm and supported him. The two of them combined found him easy enough to move. Midoriya-san, what did you do to become like this? Jairu asked. By now they had made it down the stairs. I'm just like you guys. If I overuse my quirk, it causes physical repercussions. Just for me, when I use multiple quirks, it eats away at my stamina and strength even faster. This effect is from one quirk in particular. Izuku explained, his stomach starting to turn. At this rate, he'd need to work on his quirk resistance in general if he was going to use this many consistently. Before any kind of panic could set in, Midoriya also added, You're both mutant type, I can't copy yours. The last thing he wanted was to be dropped face first on the ground. Kyoka sighed in relief. That's good to know. Izuku just hung his head in disappointment. He didn't have the energy to be his usual confident, strong-willed self. All Might watched the two students carry Izuku. One for all must be taking a toll on him, All Might thought. Mineta had made it back. Can anyone tell what the villains did wrong? Pick a fight with a pro. Denki mouthed off. Momo seemed to mirror that thought when she spoke up. Could any of us have beaten him? Of course. These aren't 1v1 battles. You have to rely on your teammate to make up for your weaknesses. Even in that battle we just witnessed, Midoriya had to rely on Ojiro. Ojiro took the brunt of the attack while Midoriya sneaked behind enemy lines and infiltrated. All Might pointed out. TCH, I wouldn't need anyone's help to beat Izuku 1v1. Katsuki snarled. What dauntless pride. Midoriya would give the teachers of UA a run for their money. All Might frowned, looking at Katsuki. Everyone did great today. Even if you lost, you learned a valuable lesson. Teamwork is important, and so is respecting each other. Even though Midoriya beat them, they were the first to help him. All Might both congratulating and chastising the students. Get changed and head back to class. At the infirmary. Izuku's head spun from the pain and the vertigo. Kyoka and Ojiro watched over him. Ojiro was a pretty normal guy from what Izuku gathered. Kyoka was pretty nice as well. What do you think about 7 Days to Live? I like the title tracks, but the rest of their album is just weird. Izuku commented. Somehow they had got on the topic of music. Izuku was an anything that sounds good kind of guy. Kyoka was sort of the same way, but gravitated to rock. That's a neo-rock band. I love seeing those guys live. Best concert I've ever been to, she replied, smiling. I've never been to any concerts, Izuku admitted. Chio walked up to him. You're lucky, young man. This is a CT of your brain, she said, handing him an X-ray. He looked at her like, what am I supposed to do with this? The nurse sighed. Individuals with psychic power usually use this part of the brain to command their power. She pointed to one part and circled it with her finger. But that's not you. Your entire brain chemistry is different than any quirk I've ever seen. The best I can tell you is that you gave yourself a concussion. Not a severe one, but a mild one. Recovery girl explained, taking her x-ray back. Too many of those and you'll be out for the count, Kyoka said, punching his arm lightly. All Might came into the room. The two students jumped from seeing him. You two can return to class. I'd like to speak to Midoriya, All Might requested. The two students nodded. Midoriya waited for them to leave before speaking. I was having a pleasant conversation, Toshinori-sensei. All Might's form deflated. He coughed up a bit of blood. I'm worried about you, Midoriya, All Might admitted. Izuku sighed and rolled his eyes. You didn't tell me he knew the real you, Toshinori, she said, poking him with her staff. You didn't come see me just to say you're worried. What's this about? Midoriya asked, making eye contact with All Might. I want to talk to you about One for All. I told you how it worked, but not the history. All Might started pulling up a chair. Before he managed to continue, Izuku interjected. Are you sure you want to share this with me? I'm not the successor. I have a version of what you have, but it's not One for All. This kid is perfect for the symbol of peace, All Might thought. Think of it this way, you know that I'm dying. This incredible power can be passed along, giving another individual the ability to do great justice with it. If you truly want to become the symbol of peace, it's in your best interest to keep this power alive and on your side. Toshinori grinned, knowing it was a sound argument. Izuku thought the same things. Okay, you got me. The symbol of peace needs an equal, a paragon of justice by my side, if you will. Good. Now that we see eye to eye, let me explain the origin. Long ago, when quirks first became known, a certain man was born. This man had the power to take and give quirks. Much like you. Now this man had a younger brother. This younger brother had a strong sense of justice, but he was quirkless. Well, as you can imagine, the older brother went on to dominate all of Japan. He was unstoppable with his army of super quirk users and himself. After his domination, he took pity on his younger brother and gave him a rather useless-sounding quirk. The ability to stockpile power. On its own it would have been weak, but you see, the younger brother had a quirk. It was a dormant quirk that had only been awakened when this other quirk was given to him. He had the power to pass down his quirk. This was the birth of One for All. I am the 7th generation of this power. A power that has been cultivated and grown throughout the years. Now this older brother had a name too. All for One. This is the name of the most powerful villain to ever walk the land. I was the one to take him down, but he left me with a life-threatening injury. All Might explained, sparing no detail. A thought formed in Izuku's mind. My mom said my father's quirk was the ability to breathe fire. Knowing what I do now, do you think it's possible that I could be related to All for One? The thought scared Izuku. If his father was the infamous villain, and his power was as such, then it would be even harder to escape his fate. Unless, of course, he put in more hard work and became the symbol of peace despite his blood. I do not know for certain. We have never collected a blood sample of All for One, All Might admitted. Then promise me, if you ever capture him, you will let me know, Izuku said, sitting up and grabbing All Might's Silver Age costume. The flames of determination and passion burned in his eyes. I'll see what I can do. All Might met Izuku's gaze. Izuku let go of All Might. What are you looking for in a successor? I want to help you, Izuku stated, standing up from the bed. Strong sense of justice is crucial. Physically fit would be nice, but I can work with them on that. Good judge of character. Iron-willed. A quirk is unnecessary. Maybe a few other qualities. All Might listed, thinking he should make a checklist. That describes me to a degree. I'll start poking and prying then. I've got a few in mind, but I'll have to get to know them more, Izuku stated, pulling off diodes. Who do you have in mind? All Might asked, genuinely curious. Yayorozu, Uraraka, Kirishima, Azuiida, and Ojiro come to mind. Of them, I'd beat on Uraraka, Kirishima, or Ida actually accepting the power. The others would probably decline, as it's too much of a save-the-world level responsibility, Izuku replied. The vertigo was gone and his nausea had subsided. I'll start watching them. If you could give me a report every week, that would be great too, All Might requested. Sure thing. I'll just add that to my homework, Izuku sighed. Double the work, half the reward. Izuku held out his hand as a gesture of good faith in All Might and of himself. All Might gave him one good shake. The green-haired teen smirked and left the infirmary. He's a good one, Toshinori, Chio chimed in. I know. I'm glad he's on our side, All Might chuckled. A mostly normal day. It was the period before lunch. Instead of having a math class, Aizawa decided something more important should be addressed. Alright, I need you guys to decide on a class president and a VP. I don't care how, but you have to till lunch to decide, Aizawa bluntly stated. He crawled into a sleeping bag off to the left and found a good corner to nap in. I propose we vote for our class president and VP. We shall do this democratically, Ida said, walking to the front of the class. Won't everyone just vote for themselves? Denki pointed out, looking lazy in his chair. Exactly, so if anyone gets more than one vote, then they'll have earned it, Ida rebutted. Momo created a stack of 7 by 10 centimeters pieces of paper. Ida handed them out to the entire class. Everyone was given 5 minutes to decide. After that, they collected all the slips and Ida tallied them. Midoriya 4. Yaoyorozu 4. Ida 2. Todoroki 2. Bakugo 2. Kaminari 2. Mineta 1. Kirishima 1. Ashido 1. Siro 1. While Izuku didn't mind being chosen, he didn't really want the responsibility. Yaoyorozu would be perfect for the role. Ida probably would be too. Okay, let's hold the tie-breaker round, Ida stated. Momo provided another stack of paper. This time Momo and Izuku were barred from voting. Yaoyorozu 13. Midoriya 5. Congratulations, Yaoyorozu-san, you've been voted as the class president, Ida declared, pointing to the chalkboard. Izuku whispered to her. Are you sure you want me up here with you? She whispered back. Why not? You've shown yourself to be a pretty good leader. Definitely better than me. Izuku whispered. You shouldn't doubt yourself. He ended the conversation, walking back to his seat. The rest of the time was dedicated to studying. Momo was quick at work, thinking about how she wanted to delegate the responsibilities. Lunchtime was fairly normal. Almost everyone was now sitting at the same table. It was lively for sure. Laughing, jokes, and more than a little swearing from Katsuki. Then the alarms started to blare. A random student nearby made a panic statement. A level 3 alarm? I've never seen one before, and I'm a second year. Before anyone from Class 1A moved, Izuku shouted. Just stay calm and stay put. If this was an invasion or attack, teachers would already be out here managing the chaos. Only part of Class 1A complied. Mainly Izuku's friends and a few others just watched the insane panic. The green-haired teen knew he'd have to find Momo and get her to deal with this. She was class president after all. Izuku was more than built enough to resist being pushed and pulled around by the crowds. Momo was taller than most, and it was easy to spot her. The sea of students had been gridlocked in the narrow hallways. Momo was by a wall, getting slowly squished. The green-haired teen glanced out the window and saw the reporters and camera crews. He now understood what set off the alarm. He made it to her and pushed away several students. Using his pure brute strength, he created a small area for them. She was against the wall. He had his hands on the wall and next to both sides of her head. He had bought her about 15 centimeters 6 inch of space. This was the closest anyone had been to her. His chest and broad shoulders had been barely 2 centimeters 1 inch from hers. Well, princess, what do you suppose we should do to stop this mess? Izuku asked, catching her attention. What can we do about it? I heard one of the second years saying this only happens when an intruder is on campus. Momo asked. It's just a crew of reporters and cameramen, Izuku retorted. We need to get this under control before someone gets trampled or crushed. Then why don't you do something? Momo asked, confused as why he would need her help. Because they trust you. My reputation has already been dragged through the mud. I can get you in sight, but you need to be the one to calm them down, Izuku explained, getting pushed into her. He glanced over his shoulder. If you guys don't give me some room, I'll blow up this entire corridor. Rage was clear on his voice. This gave them back some room. What do you have in mind? Momo put her serious face on. I'll float you and push you in the right direction, the rest is all you, Izuku stated, pulling off one of his gloves with his teeth. Okay, do it, Momo requested. Izuku smirked. You might want to make some shorts, otherwise everyone's going to get one hell of a view. Momo blushed but nodded. He put his hand on her clothed stomach. Izuku had found one that he could in fact activate force nullification through thin clothing. It required him to apply a bit more pressure than normal. Momo had slipped on a created pair of shorts just in time to feel the weightlessness. Somehow he had activated it through her clothing. The green-haired boy gently pushed her up out of the crowd and aimed her to the exit sign. Thinking a bit out of panic, she created an air horn. Her orientation was almost horizontal by the time she reached the sign. She could see the reporters outside. She blew the air horn. This immediately got everyone's attention. "We're all UA students here, right? Then we should act like it. It looks like the new reporters tripped the alarm. You can see them outside if you look out the window," Momo yelled. The crowd started to murmur and look out the windows. Momo saw Izuku give her a thumbs up from the corner of the hallway. That made her smile. Slowly, the crowd dispersed, leaving her in the hallway still floating. This gave her some time to think about the feeling of weightlessness. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't terrible either. Kind of like being submerged in water but being able to breathe. She quickly found the most infuriating thing being the inability to move at all. Swimming or any movement didn't really work. Izuku was standing right below her. "Having fun? I was for a bit, but I can't swim or move at all," she lamented. "You need to create propulsion from another source if you want it to move," Izuku replied, touching 4 fingers together. Gravity had re-engaged and she was now free falling. The sudden application of gravity sent her limbic system into a panic. Then 2 strong arms caught her. He had eased her descent and was now carrying her. Much to Momo's embarrassment, she was being carried bridal style by her now VP. She could feel one gloved hand on her shoulder, and her legs rested on his arm. He was being very careful not to accidentally touch her skin. "Well done. That was quick and to the point. I think everyone chose correctly making you president," Izuku commented, still carrying her. She smiled at the compliment, and then blushed. "It would be fine if you called me Momo-san." "Oh, really? I've got one better. Momoheim," Izuku rebutted. That one really made her blush. The worst part was he was being sincere and endearing as hell. She nodded instead of replying, as she might say something more embarrassing. He let her down and replaced his glove. They returned to lunch, Izuku acting as if that exchange was a normal kind of thing. Momo was stuck in her head again. She couldn't believe she would be the one to quell the crowd. All it took was a bit of a push from him. Whatever she had thought of him was shattered. He was a nice guy and wanted those around him to excel. She concluded that he's actually pretty selfless given the opportunity. The rest of lunch was uneventful. Izuku had more or less just shrugged off the whole event. The class couldn't stop talking about Momo's courage and how she single-handedly calmed down the crowd. As much that should bother Izuku, it was more par for the course than anything. Somehow the battle trial had made the class less willing to talk to him, or acknowledge him on occasion. Uraraka and Ida still talked to him, but they seemed like the exception. Katsuki had made it a mission of his to distance himself from Izuku to a degree. He even made Mineta trade seats with him. Izuku sighed and opened his hero analysis for the future notebook. He was on volume 13. The class of 1A had been split into 2 volumes, 13 and 14. This included sketches, notes, hero costume, and even support items that could help. Personality summaries were also included but left much to be desired since they were just observations more than concrete character assessments. The final bell had rung and an unfairly face graced his desk. Yaoyorozu was standing next to his desk. "How may I help you, Momoheim?" Izuku asked in an unusually formal tone. "I wanted to discuss our responsibilities and what each of us should take, Izuku-san," Momo answered, getting the attention of a few classmates. Whether it was jealousy or skepticism, Izuku had earned a few glares. Uraraka and Ida were going to stay behind, but decided against it. It took a few minutes before the entire class had been cleared out. Aizawa made one comment before leaving. "I expect that nothing will be astray when I come back in a few hours to close up." He wasn't the normal teacher that say things like "don't do anything I wouldn't," or "I expect both of to leave within half an hour." Nope, he just let anything happen as long as the status quo wasn't disrupted too much. "You have my attention, so sit, and you can tell me what you want," Izuku offered, pushing his homework and books into his backpack. She complied and pulled out a well-laid-out plan/speech. This did not surprise Izuku in the least. What was getting him was this unnerving feeling. He felt like she had something else to get off her chest. Not a confession, but maybe one, definitely a more romantic vibe. "So first we have to fix your image. I took some time and asked around. You're horribly misunderstood," Momo stated, gaining a quick statement from Izuku. "No kidding." He shrugged. She smiled at the comment. "You're powerful. Even more so than Todoroki-san. We need to leverage that. I want you to use your power minimally in group exercises and rely only on your teammates. People need to understand your group first, and you second. Well, that's true most of the time. What if it would have made the difference? Izuku asked, hoping to derail her. Derailing someone from a well-planned speech or plan would allow someone to see just how well thought out the whole thing is. If you can't derail them, it's more than a simple idea. Stick to your guns. Use only if asked. If they are asking for your help, then that means they trust you to some extent. People also don't like being overshadowed too much. Now, of course, if lives are on the line, I expect you to use everything you have to prevent it. Momo instructed, her gaze intense. She really meant it. Okay. Beyond my reputation, how else do you want to do this? Izuku wondered. I'll take point, leading, coordinating, and planning. I'll handle all of the delegating and who should do what. I want you to be the enforcer. I think I'm respected enough that people will generally do what I ask, but they fear you. I want you to keep people in line and correct delinquent behavior. You're probably the best example right now of what a pro should act like and be like, so I want you to push people to better themselves and curb behavior that's not fitting for a hero. Momo explained, feeling a twinge of annoyance from Izuku. Her comment about fear got to him. He didn't realize he was feared. The least ideal position to be in if you want to make friends. Izuku was about to cross his arm when she reached out and grabbed his hand. This was surprising. Momo was usually reserved and afraid to touch him. I'm sorry. I crossed a line. But Izuku, you shouldn't let what they think of you affect you so much. Momo pleaded with him. But I must. If you think they're hard to change, then wait until we debut. My past will haunt me and my quirk inspires a certain line of thought. Even All Might thinks as much. Izuku slumped in his chair. Then allow me to help you break the chain. You're so hellbent on believing in people that you won't believe in yourself. Have faith in me so that I may instill others to have faith in you. Momo shouted at him, getting frustrated by his doubt. It was like hers after all. Izuku sat up straight and looked her right in the eyes. Don't think for a moment that if I saved each and every one of them, they would be grateful. If anything, that would just prove the kind of monster I am. I don't want to be a villain, but everything I've learned so far has pointed me towards that end. That was new info to Momo. He must have learned something recently that was significant and evil. His usual determination and passion was wavering. With her mind, a thought solidified. She needed to know more. Touching him would accomplish a few goals. It was meant to be a gesture of goodwill to the class, her giving her power to him. It would be a conscious, purposeful decision that meant she had faith in him. Second, she wanted a reason to spend more time with him. Not in a romantic way, but as a friend. Something about him sang to her. He was easy to talk to and had meaningful, thought-out comments. Academically, they were pretty close and he could outplan her any day of the week. Lastly, she wanted to know if she was using her quirk well. Time and time again, her perception of her quirk had been tarnished. She had spotted his hero analysis for the future notebooks and couldn't help wonder if she was in there. She reached out, trying to touch his face. He was swift. He had caught her hand in a split second and restrained it. It was a feint, though. He replied with venom. I don't want you pity, Momo. He had dropped the honorific. He would be in a second even more angry. She had slid up her other arm and managed to touch him. There was nothing she felt making skin-to-skin contact. He was warm, though. Izuku jumped from his seat and started to pace around. He was furious. Momo didn't quite understand. She got up and put her hand on his shoulders. He was facing away. She spoke up. Izuku-san, I don't regret what I just did. I'll even tell them myself. It was my choice after all. Then he turned to her. The glare and annoyance on his face cut deep. Izuku explained, no more rage or venom. You don't get it, Momo. Quirks are interesting things. Did you know yours is a passive type with an active component? Which means I can't turn it off. Momo made a grave error thinking about how his quirk worked. She was under the impression it was like that of a laundry list or something simple that just allowed him to select and combo. Instead, it actually was this complex relationship between passive and active. This actually made more sense why the strain on him was so great using multiple quirks for a prolonged period. She chastised herself for being so foolish. Meeting his gaze, she started to get teary-eyed. She was better than this. Yaoyorozu was about to turn and run. She turned and took one step. The green-haired teen decided that can't be how today ends. He reached out and grabbed her arm. Izuku pulled and spun her into him. For a moment she was left breathless by the quick choice. They were sort of hugging. "I'm sorry. You were just trying to help. I'm grateful for that. And I know that look in your eyes. That self-hatred. It's not a pretty look for you, Momoheim," Izuku whispered into her ear. She laughed at that. Momo gave him one good squeeze. "Thank you," was all she whispered back. He let go of her and his usual demeanor had returned. He wanted to explore the quirk, but it would have to wait. Within his quirk space, hers manifested as an emotion, diligence. "We're going to have to do this more often," Izuku chuckled, picking up his backpack. "The hugging?" she replied, her mind clearly in a whirlwind of thoughts. Izuku laughed at her train of thought. "The studying, but if you want I can throw in a few hugs for free." Momo blushed, but laughed at the silly comment. "Do you want me to create a study plan for my quirk?" Momo asked, spotting the clock. It had been nearly an hour. That depends. How much do you know about your quirk? Is it more a feeling, or can you quantify the experience and gauge exactly how you're using it?" Izuku replied, leaving her with much to consider. "I've never thought it that way. But it's getting late and we should head home," Momo offered. "You're right. May is going to kill me for not texting, and so is my mom." Izuku chuckled, pulling out his phone. He had left it on silent, and indeed they had blown up his phone. "May? Is that your girlfriend?" Momo asked, walking side by side with him down the hall. "It sure is. She in the support department. She's a bit crazy, but I love her," Izuku stated, realizing that would have been a bit awkward to hear. "Oh, I'll have to meet her sometime," Momo replied. "I would not recommend that with your power. She and the rest of them would go nuts over what you can do," Izuku commented, earning a smile from her. "I'll take that under consideration," Momo teased, nudging Izuku. They both chuckled. The rest of the walk out of the school was about heroes and small talk. Momo tried to weave in some technical questions about his quirk and hers. Much to her surprise, he understood a lot more chemistry than he should have and could explain the mechanics of his powers in much greater detail than she first thought. They parted ways at the front gate. Momo had a limo after all to catch. A fact that Izuku merely summed up in one phrase. "Oh right, you're rich." A shrug had followed that statement. Her wealth didn't seem to matter much to him. In the limo ride back home, she had the entire series of events on replay. It felt good to get rid of this nervousness she had being near him. It was also great to find or well make someone that could now understand the burden of knowledge her quirk required. Momo could for sure call him her friend, and if they continued, probably be her best friend soon enough. If she was honest with herself, she had a bit of crush on him. There was more than enough to like about him, and he was easy on the eyes. But after replaying today's events, he hadn't made any real attempt to flirt with her. He had the usual quips, but they were fun and harmless. It's also not like he didn't have opportunity. If anything, that just made it more concrete that he wasn't interested in her that way. If she said he wasn't disappointed, it would have been a lie. But oh well, she would take a friend instead. Lunch had just ended and the class was returning. Aizawa was waiting for them to get seated. Which was odd. Like people should be worried odd. "We're going to hold today's hero training at the USJ," Aizawa stated with a picture popping up behind him. Unforeseen Simulation Joint was what the abbreviation stood for. It didn't mean anything to the up-and-coming heroes. "There's a bus waiting outside. I expect you all down and in costume in 10 minutes, Aizawa said, exiting the room. Momo took charge of the room immediately. "Get your home costume and get out single file. No need to rush, 10 minutes is pretty generous," Momo commanded, standing up from her spot. That caught most of the class by surprise. Izuku waited for a few people to get done before getting his suitcase. He made sure to watch the class and make sure no one had problems. Izuku's black suit was easy to put on and the metal parts were a snap, quite literally. Izuku was out first and got to the bus. "Open seating, nice. Momo will like that." The rest of the students caught up in time. "Alright guys, single file, I've got a seating plan in mind," Momo said to everyone. "It's open seating, just come in and take a spot," Izuku said, waving everyone from a window. Yayo rose aside and just waved everyone on. The USJ was on campus, but like a 10-minute drive from the school. The UA campus was about the size of a small city in scope. "Midoriya-san, your combat suit is growing on me. It's just so manly and useful," Kirishima pointed out, smacking Izuku's shoulder. That cheered Izuku up. "It's a titanium tungsten composite. It's for the recoil from my quirk," he explained, tapping the metal. "You mean my quirk?" Katsuki snarled. It's his quirk now. You have your own and he has his. Momo rebutted, glaring at him. It's still my quirk. Katsuki retorted, venom is his voice. Apparently, Aizawa had heard enough and ended the conversation. Whether it's your or not doesn't matter. You still have your quirk and you're going to develop it differently from his. What matters is that he's here with everyone else trying to become a hero. The group of students were tense, and a tension in the air was made. They unloaded from the bus as soon as they arrived. The group entered the large stadium. The Space Hero 13 was waiting for them. Welcome, heroes in training. This is the USJ. Here we're going to learn how to apply our quirks to rescue operations. It explained, gesturing out to the whole area. Aizawa had asked the Space Hero about All Might. Izuku noticed he held up 3 fingers and made some kind of excuse. So All Might used up his limit, Izuku noted. Uraraka was just fangirling over the Space Hero. You must really like 13? Izuku asked, standing next to her. Yeah, he's the one that inspired me the most to be a hero. He's just so cool fighting natural disasters and rescuing people. Uraraka had sparkles in her eyes. 13 rose its voice, addressing the whole class again. Yesterday, you learned how to use your quirks and cooperate towards a single objective. Now today this will be part rescue, part restraint. I don't need to remind everyone just how dangerous some of our quirks can be. This is why rescue training is done, so we can gauge what and how to use our quirk to help. A black portal opened in the center of the USJ. A man with hands on his face walked through. Another being of shadow similar to the portal came through as well. Then dozens of villains followed them. The hand villain looked to his portal associate. Kurojiri, I don't see All Might. He's supposed to be here. A minor setback, Shigaraki-san, we still have some hostages. The portal villain replied. A good point. Let's see if a few dead kids will bring him out of hiding, the insane hand villain shouted. Aizawa stood at the top of the stairs. Is this part of the test too? Ida asked, seeing the villains flood in. No, those are real villains. 13, protect them. Kaminari, anything from the outside? Aizawa asked, putting on his goggles. Nothing, we're getting jammed. The electric teen replied. I'll hold them off. We need to get someone out of here and get a message back to UA. Aizawa shouted before descending the stairs. Let me help you. Izuku asked, standing at the top of the stairs. Protect them, Midoriya. Aizawa dashed into the courtyard. The portal villain appeared behind the group. TSK. We can't have any of you escaping and ruining this execution. His voice was a bit disembodied. I'll handle him, run! 13 shouted, flipping open its finger. The black hole quirk activated, pulling in Kurojiri's wisps, but not moving him much. Ida started to bolt along with the rest of the students. Izuku stayed put. He was torn between running and assisting. He had the power to do so and felt a need to help. What a powerful quirk! Too bad you're not used to using it in combat. Kurojiri made a portal in front of him and behind 13. Ida was nearly to the door. Portals appeared below some of the slower students. Izuku was watching as all the events unfolded so quickly. The instant 13's black hole came through the portal, Izuku made his own attack. The green-haired teen was on the other side of the portal. Green lightning surged and an explosion was detonated through the portal. Kurojiri was not expecting this. The green blast blew him back and forced him to relocate. Ida, Uraraka, Sato, and Sero were still left among the students. 13 was incapacitated from their quirk. Kurojiri appeared near Izuku. That's a strong quirk. Nearly got me, Kurojiri stated. The neck brace and his clothes were much worse for wear. The fire from his blast had eaten a dozen or so holes in his clothes. The heat had left his brace uncomfortably hot. Then you won't mind if I use it again on you, Izuku shouted, feinting a blast forward. The portal villain tried the same trick on 13. The teen planned ahead for this and directed a psychic bullet through the portal behind him. Despite a low amount of force, it still dented the metal brace. What was that? Kurojiri looked to the other student. Ida and Sato were trying to pry the door open. The villain rose one arm. You think you can ignore me? Izuku shouted, reaching through the portal behind him. The teen made contact with the metal brace and Kurojiri started to float away. Izuku pulled back his hand just before the portal closed. The teen leveled a round explosion at Kurojiri. Now the portal villain was fed up with Izuku. A portal opened below the teen. Izuku touched his face out of reaction. He flew upward, getting sucked into a portal anyway. What a nuisance! Kurojiri looked to the door and Ida was out of sight. The portal villain grimaced and retreated. Izuku found himself free falling. Somehow his force nullification had been turned off. He was near the roof and falling. Out of instinct he touched his face. The teen floated in the air and examined the situation below. Todoroki was at the landslide zone and doing fine. Momo, Kaminari, and Jiraiya were at the mountain zone and being overwhelmed. He couldn't see into the conflagration zone or the ruins zone. Mineta and Ajiri were at the flood zone. They were about to be villain food. Izuku decided to help them first. He blasted over to them, picking up quite a bit of speed. The teen slammed into the boat feet first. The entire boat rocked from the impact. He released force nullification. "Are you guys okay?" Izuku asked, looking at a wide-eyed Mineta and Ajiri. "We're saved!" the little teen called out, hugging Izuku. "I've got to admit, that was good timing," she sighed in relief. "I'm going to get both of you out of this. There's no reason for us to pick fights with the villains on their home turf," Izuku reasoned. "What's the plan?" Ajiri asked. "I'll carry both of you out here and drop you off with everyone else," Izuku stated, less choice, more of the only option. Ajiri and Mineta nodded. "Ajiri-san on my back, Mineta I'll carry," Izuku said, kneeling down in front of her. He felt her weight against him. He clasped his hand around her thigh, making her weightless. "Hold tight. Ajiri-san, you're weightless right now," he warned, standing up. She wrapped her legs and arms around him. Midoriya smirked, looking at Mineta. "I'll say sorry in advance." "For what dash?" Mineta started to ask before Midoriya grabbed him and launched him into the air. He touched his face and used his explosions to intercept the purple teen. Mineta was screaming a bit. "Like I said, sorry," Midoriya apologized. Mountain Zone, after the portal. Momo was momentarily disoriented by the portal and sudden change in locale. Kaminari and Jiraiya were with her. Villains started to circle around. She knew it was her duty to protect her fellow students. She made a steel quarterstaff and took point. Kaminari stood next to her, fists raised. "Can you make a sword?" Jiraiya asked, standing to Momo left. A handle jutted from her side and Jiraiya took hold of it before pulling. "All right, I like our odds," Jiraiya shouted. The villains seemed amused that they thought they could defend themselves. Joke's on them, the students could easily defend themselves. The first wave rushed them. Kaminari zapped anyone that made contact with him. Momo prioritized fighters that used weapons or longer-range quirks. Jiraiya was just thrashing anyone that got close enough. "Kaminari-san, you mentioned something about your full power yesterday," Momo asked, striking a villain in the before whipping around the staff and smashing another villain's chest. "Yeah, 1.3 million volts, but I can't aim it at all. It just explodes from me," Kaminari replied, punching one villain before grabbing a hold on another. Both got fried by his electricity. He was like a living stun gun. "Okay, I have a plan. Jiraiya, cover me, this will take some time," Momo called out to Jiraiya, who merely nodded. Landslide Zone, after the portal. This turnout of events had just annoyed Shoto more than anything. The villains he'd run into so far weren't much of a fight. They were weaklings as far as Shoto was concerned. His goal had become find out what they're here for. So far most of the villains were just idiots. Granted, he wasn't giving them much opportunity to talk before leaving them a vehicle. "Okay, talk or I'll make sure frostbite sets in," Shoto threatened another block of a villain. He didn't want to hurt the villain, but they had made their life choices, so they have to deal with a little frostbite if they aren't going to cooperate. All right, kid, I'll talk," he replied, panicking. "Good. Then why are you guys here?" Shoto questioned, staring down the villain. "We were promised revenge. We all want to kill All Might," the villain shouted. This was all Shoto needed. He completed the ice block, making sure not to give the man frostbite. His next destination was the courtyard where the hand villain was at. Ruined Zone, after the portal. Katsuki loved to fight, and the villains didn't get it through their thick skulls that they were outclassed. Kirishima was with him and proving his usefulness. The blonde teen was relentless. It was cathartic letting loose. "What do you think these guys are after?" Kirishima asked, pounding a guy through a wall. "Does it matter? We get to crack some skulls and it's all in defense." Katsuki grinning, blowing up a villain, sending them through a wall. "It's probably a good idea to know what they're after. You might miss the important fight," Kirishima reasoned, blocking a strike effortlessly. Katsuki growled. The red-haired teen was right. He could spend all day blowing these guys up and getting nowhere. First he had to find a villain that looked halfway intelligent and hopefully a coward. No sooner had he thought that did one such opportunity present itself. The villain had been matching the two students obliterate the other villains and realized it was kind of pointless to fight them. Katsuki had pinned the person to the ground and had a palm inches from his face. "Why are you here?" "We're here to kill All Might. Please don't hurt me," the villain pleaded. Katsuki nodded and then punched the villain in the face. Hard enough to knock the villain out instantly. "You hear that? Let's go visit that handy bastard," Katsuki declared, earning a nod from Kirishima. Downpour zone, after the portal. Tokoyami was not having the time of his life. It was raining sideways, diagonal ways, up sometimes, and down more or less all the time and randomly. KOING villains via sneak attacks or outright overpowering them was dreary, but it seemed like there was always more. The wind didn't make the downpour zone any funner. Koda had been ported with him and proved to be a valuable ally. At this point he just wanted to get somewhere and get some cover. He was soaked through and through. Villains made that plan much harder, but nonetheless he had to do his part and take down as many as he could. Near the fountain, Shigaraki. Aizawa was sure an impressive hero, but he was out of his depth. It infuriated Tamura that such violence was acceptable. It was infuriating that society found that violence acceptable. Kurojairi showed up next to him. "Bad news. A student escaped," the portal man stated. Fury filled Tamura. That was a colossal failure. If he wasn't the ticket out of this little scenario, Kurojairi would be dead. It wasn't uncommon to sacrifice a pawn or two, but he couldn't risk sacrificing the queen. "Our time frame has been accelerated. Nomu, kill him," Tamura commanded, pointing to Aizawa. The hulking creature with an exposed brain and a beak face moved. It had been dormant behind Tamura this whole time. It was his trump card to kill All Might. "Kurojairi, if you weren't so important for our exit strategy, I'd kill you myself," Tamura raged. "I'm sorry, Shigaraki-san, there was this student that had more than one quirk. He was powerful too," Kurojairi apologized. "More than one quirk? How's that possible? I thought Master was the only one like that," Tamura shouted, seeing a green blast in the courtyard. Back to Izuku. He had just dropped off Ajiri and Mineta. "Uraraka, Sato, keep them safe. I'm going to go help Aizawa-sensei." Before anyone could protest, Midoriya was off. He rocketed over to Aizawa just in time to see the hulking creature move. It was fast. Almost too fast for him to react. Aizawa tried to defend himself, but the creature pulled Aizawa to him. Midoriya had just made it in time to let loose a massive green blast. It was in 75% blast and it hurt. The hulking creature was caught completely off guard. It was sent flying a few dozen meters away. The fire had burned its body, but the concussive force did nothing. "What are you doing, Midoriya?" Aizawa shouted. "Providing you aid. He's coming again. I'll draw his fire, you see if you can strangle that thing," Izuku stated, earning a nod from Aizawa. It was a pretty good plan for only a split-second amount of info. The hulking beast charged headlong at Izuku. He reached out, aiming to intercept the fist thrown. His pads made contact with the creature, activating force nullification. He nearly retched on the spot, but held fast. The beast's speed and power had been rendered useless. Izuku surged power in his other hand and put a palm on the beast's chest. Another 75% explosion was let loose. The beast careened across the courtyard, smashing into a building. Izuku immediately released his force nullification and determined that was all he could use. The portal villain and the hand villain had joined the fray. The portal villain would prove to be the harder of the two to deal with. Aizawa couldn't turn off his quirk, but could turn off the hand guy's quirk. The hand villain had rushed Aizawa while the portal villain was keeping Izuku busy. Izuku was counting and dodging the portals. It looked like he could open 10 portals simultaneously. He also had the power to decide which way the portal faced. Izuku had been using his telekinetic attacks to determine which portals lead where. He was also trying to expand his telekinetic sensory to include the portals. Aizawa was handling the hand villain just fine, if not overwhelming him fairly easily. Midoriya had added explodable bullets to his assault on the portal villain. Even if he managed to redirect the bullet, it was rendered harmless due to Izuku's armor and minor resistance he had. He was still winning, just denting and hurting the portal villain with every successful explodable bullet and psychic bullet. The hand villain shouted, "Kurojairi, some help over here! This guy's a handful." "I must apologize, Shigaraki. But this twerp is holding my attention completely. He's too powerful to give him any chances, Kurojiri stated, taking another bullet to his chest. Noma! Shigaraki shouted. The hulking beast known as Nomu was blindly fast. It was playing with them before. A handprint had been cauterized into Nomu's chest. Clearly, Izuku could damage it with hot enough flames, but those explosions only reached that temperature at basically point-blank range. And shaping the blast took too much time. All of Kurojiri's portal closed and Nomu was on Izuku. He must have pissed off the beast. Oh shit! Izuku whispered before the beast punched him. Its fist was so large it extended from his mouth to chest. Midoriya could feel himself ragdoll. His jaw and chest bone had been crushed by the hit. Thankfully, his quirk was his saving grace, or at least his new one. Izuku's jaw bone snapped into place. He felt the pain again. His chest bone mended and became whole again. He was out of breath, but alive. The metal on his chest had been crushed by the impact. The soreness subsided, and his body was back to peach shape. His newest quirk was super regeneration. Didn't stop any of the pain from the healing that ensued, but definitely could prevent fatal wounds. For once his power storage had been empty. Super regeneration must have taken from that first. This was due to a conflict with Momo's quirk. He hadn't learned how to use it, and its storage component. A hand was on his chest. He had closed his eyes due to the pain. He looked up to see Uraraka. Midoriya, are you okay? She shouted, bringing him back. He sat up, making her jump. His vision zoomed in. Aizawa was not holding his own. Come on, let's go! He jumped to his feet and pulled her with him. I'll tank the beast. I need to. You stop it. He's super strong, so be ready for that. If you can float him, he'll be out for the count, Izuku stated, touching his face and fully clasping his hand on her. He blasted off, taking both of them with. Tamura had taken a back seat watching Nomu. Aizawa was trying his best, but Nomu was just pummeling him. This delighted Tamura greatly. That's when he spotted the green-haired student. The student was rocketing towards them. He had someone else in tow. At this point, he wanted to kill the student personally. He was about to move when ice suddenly crept up his leg. The man looked around to spot a white-haired kid with ice and frost emanating from his right side. Kurojiri was the next one to get a surprise attack. A blonde-haired kid had gotten the drop on him. Use your portal even once and I'll blow you to Kingdom Come. Shit! These kids cornered us, Tamura thought in annoyance. Nomu, get frosty, Tamura commanded, pointing to the white-haired kid. Just as Nomu bolted at the white-haired kid, the green one intercepted him. Nomu dodged the regular blast and punched the green-haired kid. The green-haired kid skid across the ground. His arms had been broken protecting himself. Bones and blood was visible around him. Then, much to Tamura's dismay, the super regeneration that Nomu had kicked on for the kid. He winced as the bones sunk back into his skin. Oh, come on! I call hacks on that. What did you do, copy his quirk? Tamura shouted. That's when the blonde spoke up. Damn right, villain, whatever power you have will be his to use if you touch him. The blonde was laughing evilly at his own comment. That's so unfair for a quirk like to be on your side. That's not allowed by the rules. You can't have more than one god-tier power at play on the field at once. Tamura was delirious. The pain was blinding, but Izuku grit his teeth and got back up. Uraraka was near to Nomu. Todoroki was trying to slow down the beast by freezing him. The beast's regeneration was faster than the frostbite. Todoroki was at the end of his rope. If he just used his flame, he could take down that monster. Izuku cursed the white-haired teen. Knowing the plan, the green-haired teen shot into action. Uraraka, this is your chance, don't miss it, she said, blasting past her. Ochako was torn. She had to act, but never before had so much pressure been on her. Izuku's plan was great, and if it worked they could win the fight. But she didn't know if she could do it. He was relying on her. That's when Izuku shouted to her about giving her a chance. Before she knew it, her legs were running and her mind was racing. Instinct had taken over, and she was determined to see this through to the end. She held up her hands ready to apply her quirk at a moment's notice. Todoroki froze part of the creature, giving Izuku a split-second opening to blast it. Its ire was focused back on Izuku. She knew he would have to take another hit. More pain than any of them could imagine. She was close. Uraraka lunged at Nomu, hand stretched out. Her pads connected with his lower back. Mission success. Looking over, she saw Izuku on the ground, his chest punched in. He was struggling to breathe as his bones and muscles moved back into place. Looking to Nomu once more, she pushed him up and away. The beast was using up 85% of her capacity just to hold it in the air. If it started to struggle, she would have minutes before it broke free. Kneeling next to Izuku, she felt his chest bones move. Whatever quirks were trying to keep him alive was being prevented by his armor. Uraraka pulled and ripped at the rubber underarmor. Then all at once the chest armor and rubber layer ripped off. He was breathing again. "Thank you, Uraraka-san," Izuku wheezed. The villain known as Shigaraki was frozen up to his thighs. Todoroki got over to Izuku. "How is he?" "He's fine for the most part. I can't believe he took 3 hits from that monstrosity," Uraraka replied. "Help me up," Izuku asked, straining to stand Uraraka, and Todoroki complied, helping him to his feet. "Todoroki-san, get over to Aizawa-sensei. He needs treatment." "Uraraka-san, how much longer?" Izuku asked, pointing a palm at Shigaraki. Uraraka whispered. "A few minutes at most. He's heavy, and stopping even the smallest movements is eating a lot of my potential." "How was it, Shigaraki? Did you enjoy fighting the students of UA? This was a mistake, wasn't it? Because if you had fought All Might, there would be no way you could have beaten him," Izuku mused, grinning. The hand villain slapped the ice, and it turned to water. He lunged for Bakugo. Bakugo rose up a palm, giving Kurogiri a moment to escape. A portal opened in front of Shigaraki and behind Bakugo. Izuku coated the villain's hand in psychic energy. The hand made contact with Katsuki and nothing happened. "Clever, chosen one," Shigaraki snarled, seeing Izuku charge at him. "Nomi, get down here!" The beast convulsed until Uraraka had to break her hold. The situation looked dire at that point. Then their savior made his appearance. All Might declared, "Fear not, for I am here." There was no classic smile on his face. He was mad. All Might vanished from view. Several villains still standing got KO'd. He was making his way to them, curving a path of justice. Mountain Zone, post All Might appearance. "Do you feel that, villains? All Might showed up and you're all about to lose," Kaminari taunted. Momo was ready to develop her ace. "Gyro-san, get under the blanket. Kaminari-san, as soon as we're under, let loose." "What are you going to do?" Kaminari asked, watching her back bloat. The rainbow-like effect from her quirk bloated at her back. Then the item exploded from her, tearing her hero costume. It was a white insulating sheet. It was designed to protect them from his electrical discharge. "Now!" Momo shouted as Gyro huddled up next to under the blanket. "Time to shine! Indiscriminate 1.3 million volts!" Kaminari shouted before an explosion of electricity gave from him. Dozens upon dozens of villains got caught up in the electric blast. Their bodies got scorched from the intense power. Unfortunately, this left Kaminari defenseless. Momo got up from the blanket, one arm over her bosom to prevent anyone from seeing anything. She had abandoned her staff in favor of a steel baton. Gyro was blushing a bit seeing Momo like that. Their fight wasn't over yet. Kaminari was derping out, having fried his brain. Many villains they had beaten earlier were getting up. Then one guy in particular pulled himself out of the dirt. "At the end of your rope, kids?" Electricity coursed over his skin. He was the jammer. "Not even close!" Momo got into a defensive stance and beckoned the villain to attack. Gyro looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was. But maybe a bit of Izuku's heroism was rubbing off on her. "Gyro-san, protect Kaminari-san!" Momo whipped her steel weapon at a villain getting up. The weapon clocked them right in the face. She made a new weapon, a wooden long sword. It didn't have much of a cutting edge, but wood had another property that made it ideal. It was a very bad conductor. She would be able to strike without worry of getting shocked. She ran headlong at the electrical mini-boss. Other villain tried to get in her way, all dispatched with single strong strike. He blocked her first hit. He wasn't some 2-bit thug. "You're going to fight with a handicap? How childish!" The man laughed, going on the offensive. Momo could only block or dodge. Protecting her dignity was becoming a bit of a hassle. She didn't want to give him the joy of seeing something that virtually no one else has seen. The ground rocked from the vibrations coming from the courtyard. "You feel that? All Might is here and he's fighting your leader. It's only a matter of time before he's up here," Momo shouted, earning a grimace from the villain. "Then I'd best get going. The name's Amp, and although wood is bad conductor, it doesn't full stop it," Amp shouted, grabbing the wooden weapon and channeling electricity through it. It wasn't random either. It was targeted somehow. Her muscles were paralyzed by the current. It was fun, but too dilute. By the time she was able to move, he was gone. She cursed her uselessness and got back to Jairu. They had someone to protect after all. Courtyard. The veteran hero took but a moment to survey the situation. Nomu was charging headlong at Izuku. All Might in a blink of an eye relocated many of the students. The veteran had moved Bakugo, Uraraka, Aizawa, and Todoroki first. Izuku was left out in the open. There was a split-second decision that had to be made. He let his instinct take over. The green-haired let loose an explosion at Shigaraki. He then stepped to the side and let loose another explosion, getting him airborne. A portal had redirected his explosion to behind where he was. The Nomu took a punch to the face so hard it sent him back into the duo villains. All Might cracked his knuckles. I'll give you one chance to surrender, villains. Otherwise I'm going to have to beat you into the dirt. Nomu, get him! This is what you were made for! Shigaraki shouted. Izuku landed some distance behind All Might. He was exhausted and knelt down. The beast charged All Might. When their fists clashed, shock waves ensued. The air pressure alone would make it impossible to get next to them. The exchange of punches increased in power. A minute or two passed of this unreal battle. Izuku was straining to keep up with their movements. There was a throw and an epic dropkick on the Nomu. Then they had a stalemate. All Might was hand to hand with Nomu pushing him back. Shigaraki was about to move and mess up the whole thing. Izuku aimed his finger at the handman. An explodable bullet ripped across the plaza. 60% power. Shigaraki didn't see it coming. The shot nailed him right in the face, knocking a hand from him. Father, the man whispered as he went to retrieve his hand. Another shot rang out. A portal was opened in defense. Then, much to their surprise, Izuku waved his other hand and the portal moved. It had taken the green-haired boy some trial and error, but the portal had a super small surface area and presence in the real world. He grabbed that presence and could move it with telekinesis. Another shot nailed Kurojiri, denting his neck brace. All Might nodded, mentally thanking Izuku. All Might pushed the Nomu off and then uppercut the beast. The pro-hero redoubled his efforts, kicking up a tidal wave of air pressure. It was pointless for Izuku to use his powers and just watched. Bakugo and Uraraka did the same. He has shock absorption. You can't beat him, Shigaraki yelled over the air pressure. Shock absorption, huh? It's not shock nullification, so it has a limit. All Might shouted, his speed becoming a blur to the onlookers. The Nomu was gaining size from the relentless barrage of hits. He was hitting him so fast that its super regeneration started to fall behind. We have a saying at this school, and I'll show you what it means. Go beyond. Plus ultra. All Might shouted. A hard left hook dazed the creature back a few steps. All Might then wound up the mother of all uppercuts. White smoke, or energy, was coming from his fist. The uppercut connected with so much force and energy that Nomu's body glowed a yellow color. It ballooned, trying to handle the extreme power. Nomu's body lost, and the force kept going. The Nomu rocketed into the ceiling at a blinding speed. Its body impacted the roof and then exploded through the side of the dome. This was it. All Might had hit his limit. He cursed himself for being so reckless earlier in the day. He still had an ace in the hole. He could bluff and if need be get Midoriya's help. You've lost, villain. Just admit defeat and give up. All Might challenged them. Izuku had gotten up and walked over the pro-hero. Surrender or face me next, Izuku shouted, his vision wavering. Even All Might could tell that he was at the end of his rope. They just had to buy some more time. Time to sell an idea, All Might smirked. Didn't you hear my understudy? This guy here is going to become my successor, and he's got one hell of a quirk. All Might boasted, steam coming off him. Why, you arrogant hero types? You think you can just get carried and get all the gear, huh? Well, we'll see about that, Shigaraki shouted, bounding towards them. Nobody's getting carried. I'm aiming to be the symbol of peace, and you're just a stepping stone for me, Izuku retorted, standing in front of All Might and taking a combat stance. A few explosions roared. Uraraka came to a skidding halt next to Izuku with Katsuki still flying in. All Might was floored by the bravado these three students showed. Then even had the power to back it up too. He looked at Uraraka and saw her determination. Shigaraki was on them when a bullet sailed through his hand. Then two more through his leg and another in his other hand. He fell onto his back, unable to move. In the distance, Snipe had shown up along with all the other teachers of UA. We have to retreat now, Kurogiri stated, making a portal below Shigaraki and teleporting himself. Izuku fell to his knees. It's over. Uraraka, would you mind giving me an arm? He asked, chuckling. Of course. Let's get you to the teachers and get some aid. Uraraka took up one of his arms and helped him walk. Join them, Bakugo. I'm going to take a moment to rest. All Might bluffed, moving ever so slowly. The blonde said something along the lines of whatever and went to help Izuku. Katsuki wasn't so petty that he wouldn't help a friend in need. But he was furious he had stolen so much of the limelight. All Might himself even declared the green-haired twerp the next symbol. This made Katsuki even madder if that was possible. He wanted to sock the giant oaf for even uttering those words. But his friend was barely moving. He had to help, no questions asked and no hassle given. Round Face had made one hell of a heroic move. She was the one after all that suggested they get back into the fray. She even made the bullseye idea that he would launch her into combat, and she'd make sure to stick the landing. Her words, not his. Regardless, she had earned a small iota of his respect. Icy Hot had been watching from a distance and marveled at the battle just like the rest of them. This is what it meant to be pro. This is what being the most powerful is like. This made Katsuki want to try all the more. The teachers were binding and securing the hordes of villains. They had recovered all the students from every zone they were in. Izuku was glad no one was hurt. Chio was furious with him. Do you even understand what you did to your body? Your fat and muscle was getting devoured by your quirk. Your muscles were wasting from what appears to be malnutrition. Chio smacked the teenage with her staff. Could you lend me or point me in the direction of a few medical books that would help me understand what's going on and what I need? Izuku asked, bowing to the doctor. She looked annoyed but gave in. Sure, I can provide you a list of reading material. Thank you, recovery girl, Izuku said, standing straight again. He spotted the group of students and walked over to them. They were all recanting their tales and fights from today. While it would be fun for Izuku, he thought it wasn't the best time. He was still a bit of an outsider. Izuku-san, how are you even standing? After the story I heard, I'd expect you to be on a stretcher. Momo had a worried look on her face. As if was the most normal thing in the world, she came over and hugged him. You need to be more careful. You're not invincible. Momo chastised, pointing her finger in his face. Izuku was blushing. She probably didn't realize what she had done, so he let her have this one. But man, are they soft. He averted his eyes and whispered, Momoheim, your leotard. It was her turn to blush and close up a coat she had been given. Momo chuckled and whispered, It's fine if it's you. It was more of an offhand statement than an admission of anything. Much like when people think out loud. Katsuki punched him the shoulder. We almost had them. If it wasn't for that Nomu creature, they would have been done for. I know what you mean. That thing was made to kill All Might. Izuku replied, smirking. I know, man. That finishing move was like something out of a video game. Kirishima mimicked the punch All Might made. It's crazy to think he has all that power, Katsuki said distantly. I know one thing for certain, Izuku stated, getting many of his classmates' attention. There's one hell of a mountain between here and the top. Most everyone agreed with that sentiment. The rest of the day was spent between answering questions with the police, the teachers, or both. Everyone had gotten a thorough physical and psychological examination from Recovery Girl. While this was a traumatic experience, the staff of UA wanted to make sure no long-term side effects would emerge. Since everyone wanted to be a hero of some kind, it was no surprise that virtually no lasting psychological effects would be had. Other than minor bruising, cuts, and scrapes, all the students checked out physically too. Even Izuku, the one that had taken the brunt of assault, had only suffered minor muscle loss. All Might had a new conversation he needed to start. He knew in his gut who should be the successor. Ochako Uraraka, the girl with the determined look and a hidden fire in her soul. It was after class and the student were about to head home. He'd have to reveal his secrets another time. He'd have to tell Izuku his decision. He'll probably be training her alongside All Might. After all, Izuku was his spiritual successor. The large man had been waiting outside for the brunette. When he finally spotted her, Uraraka-san, may I have a word with you? Her look was of panic first. A healthy reaction. Ochako's heart was racing. All Might of all people had just asked for her. He was the greatest hero of all time, and he wanted to have a chat with her. Her first thought was to the USJ and just how recklessly she had acted. Even Izuku dragged her along, but at some point she started to move for herself. Her mind was panicking, more than sure that's what he wanted to chat about. He's going to chew me out, isn't he? OMG, the suspense is the worst. She screamed in her head. She had been following him to the teacher's lounge. The more private setting only drove her thoughts more crazed. All Might got her a stool and he sat down on a couch. On the coffee table he placed 2 teacups. Tea? He asked in the most casual tone imaginable. That broke Ochako. OMG, I'm so sorry, for intervening gone jetting in the pleased and chastisema too much. Uraraka bowed, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. All Might was just in awe of the speed that was said and was mentally going through it. He chuckled, getting her attention. I have no intentions to chastise you or criticize the actions the 3 of you made. The fact is, if the 3 of you weren't there, it'd been a much different story. All Might smiled, waving her worry away. She shoulders slack and the weight on her chest vanished. It had been a lingering worry after the whole ordeal. Now I won't, but Aizawa might have a few choice words for you 3. All Might laughed, getting a nervous chuckle from her. Then what am I doing here? Uraraka asked. Something more important. Steam was bellowing off All Might at this point. Then his form collapsed in a fog of smoke. Arg, I hate how dramatic this thing can be. The voice of All Might coughed. A skeletal figure had replaced All Might. Blood was on his lips and on his hand. I'm sorry to show you this, but I need to illustrate my point, he said, coughing up more blood. It dawned on Uraraka that this skeletal man was All Might. It wasn't a doppelganger or another Quirk. This was what All Might really looked like. He was frail and dying. That hit home for her. All Might, what happened? He lifted up his shirt, showing her an absolutely grotesque-looking repair job. It was sewn and bolted together. She was so horrified that she just didn't react. 5 years ago, I fought a villain and he did this to me. My entire respiratory system is damaged and half my stomach is missing. Thanks to this, I can only use my power for 3 hours before I revert to this. He gestured to himself. That's horrible, but why show me? Uraraka was a bit confused at why she should know this, and then another thought crept in. Who else knows? I was really dreading this decision, but you're much more level-headed than I would have imagined. All Might grinned. I just stared death in the face, so this is a bit of a slower pace. Uraraka replied, trying to lighten the mood. I want you to be my successor. All Might stood up and held out his hand. A ball of energy manifested in it. Isn't Midoriya your successor? Uraraka cocked her head. In spirit, but he declined being my true successor. I have chosen you to pass the torch to. All Might explained, sitting down. Now she was confused. The torch? What are you talking about? She was bewildered. My quirk is not what many think. At its most basic level, it's just the ability to stockpile power, but it can be passed on to another. Each time the torch is passed, the stockpile grows in size. Now it is like a raging inferno. I'm offering you my power. I'm offering you the chance to be the 9th wielder of One for All. All Might clenched his fist. His charisma was off the charts. This was a lot of information to process. The ability to pass on a quirk was new. It opened many doors that Uraraka had thought were just fiction. She needed to know. Why me then? Bakugo, Ida, Yayorozu are all better candidates than me. Earlier today, did you ever find yourself just running without thinking or acting out of instinct? All Might asked, grinning at her. Yeah, after Midoriya inspired me to act, my body just knew what to do next. I don't know what, but I was just moving and acting, only watching events on replay after the fact. Uraraka explained. All famous heroes have a similar story. My body just started to move on its own. That is the essence of true heroism. All Might stated, seeing her eyes dart around. She was trying to reject the idea. Ochako was only a hero for her parents. She wasn't heroic like Midoriya or Bakugo. She was about to speak when he held up a single finger. Who was that had the plan to launch themselves at me, hoping to come to my aid? No less in my most dire time? All Might inquired, earning a bit of silence from her. Why me? Ochako said, tearing up a bit. Because I think you have more heroism in your blood than the average pro. I saw that look on your face today. So much determination and fire. That's the face people want to see when you're saving them. If that's the face you can make staring death down, then I think you more than qualified to be my successor. All Might assured her. She thought about it for a moment. If she got anything like his power, then the possibility of helping people dramatically improved. She would be more than her quirk. That kind of power would at least give her the means to help and save a lot of people. Deep down, that's what she wanted to be. I accept. Where do we start? Uraraka said, standing up. All Might grinned at her. I'd say you're about 65% of the way there to accept it. These next 2 weeks are going to be hell for you. All Might gave her one hell of a grin. If she didn't know any better, he was going to enjoy watching her transform. What's in 2 weeks? Ochako asked. And 65%? You'll find out tomorrow. One for all is powerful. If you're anything below minimally ready, I'm afraid your arms and legs would just explode from your body. All Might explained before continuing. I'll have your new schedule to follow on your desk tomorrow morning. Get some rest. Ochako grimaced at the thought of her arms and legs exploding. She nodded and excused herself. The brunette had a lot on her mind and a lot more to process. She was about to inherit a power that All Might himself wields. And that's it for part 2 of What If Deku Had Quirk Duplication. Big thanks to Draconite227 for this amazing journey. If you loved this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated with our latest adventures. Your support means the world to me, timekeepers. Until next time, stay awesome and keep dreaming big.